Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for February the 9th. Today, we are reading together by far the longest psalm that we have looked at thus far. That is Psalm number 18. Psalm 18 is described to us as praise for deliverance. It is said to be for the choir director of the servant of Yahweh, David, who spoke the words of this song to Yahweh on the day Yahweh rescued him from the grasp of all his enemies and from the power of Saul. As we read through this text, it might sound a little familiar to you because it was in a text we read last year in our daily Bible reading as we went through the first basically half of the Old Testament. It is also found in 2 Samuel chapter 22. If I were to classify this song or this psalm into a particular category, maybe you can go either way on this. It is certainly a royal psalm where the human king's strength is identified. But I like what Waltke also says about it. He describes it as a declarative praise psalm, where he declares truths that have been experienced in his life. And in doing so, it is meant as a praise toward Yahweh. So either way you go with that, you can certainly see the evidence for either one of these classifications. So let me get the text up on the screen for us here of Psalm number 18. And we'll read along together. Psalm number 18 and verse number 1. And I'll encourage you to note pronouns a lot within this psalm. Note what is said that Yahweh is doing, and then also note if there's any sections where David speaks of himself, speaking from David's perspective, what I have been able to do. So you might note that as we read through this text. Psalm number 18 in verse number 1. I love you, Yahweh, my strength. Yahweh is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer, my God, my rock where I seek refuge, my shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I called to Yahweh, who is worthy of praise, and I was saved from my enemies. Might recognize those words as lyrics to a song that we sing. The ropes of death were wrapped around me. The torrents of destruction terrified me. The ropes of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. I called to Yahweh in my distress, and I cried to my God for help. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Then the earth shook and quaked. The foundations of the mountains trembled. They shook because he burned with anger. Smoke rose from his nostrils, and consuming fire came from his mouth. Coals were set ablaze by it. He bent the heavens and came down, told darkness beneath his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew, soaring on the wings of the winds. He made darkness his hiding place, dark storm clouds his canopy around him. From the radiance of his presence, his clouds swept onward with hail and blazing coals. Yahweh thundered from heaven. The Most High made his voice heard. He shot his arrows and scattered them. He hurled lightning bolts and routed them. The depths of the sea became visible. The foundations of the world were exposed. At your rebuke, Yahweh, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He pulled me out of deep water. He rescued me from my powerful enemy and from those who hated me, for they were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but Yahweh was my support. He brought me out to a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. Yahweh rewarded me according to my righteousness. He repaid me according to the cleanness of my hands. For I have kept the ways of Yahweh and have not turned from my God to wickedness. Indeed, I let all his ordinances guide me, and I have not disregarded his statutes. I was blameless toward him and kept myself from my iniquity. So Yahweh repaid me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight. With the faithful, you prove yourself faithful. With the blameless, you prove yourself blameless. With the pure, you prove yourself pure. But with the crooked, you prove yourself shrewd. For you rescued an oppressed people. but you humbled those with haughty eyes. Yahweh, you light my lamp. My God illuminates my darkness. With you, I can attack a barricade, and with my God, I can leap over a wall. God, his way is perfect. The word of Yahweh is pure. He is a shield to all who take refuge in him. For who is God besides Yahweh? And who is a rock? Only our God. God, he clothes me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and sets me securely on the heights. He trains my hands for war. My arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have given me the shield of your salvation. Your right hand upholds me, and your humility exalts me. You make a spacious place beneath me for my steps, and my ankles do not give way. I pursue my enemies and overtake them. I do not turn back until they are wiped out. I crush them and they cannot get up. They fall beneath my feet. You have clothed me with strength for battle. You subdue my adversaries beneath me. You have made my enemies retreat before me. I annihilate those who hate me. They cry for help, but there is no one to save them. They cry to Yahweh, but he does not answer them. I pulverize them like dust before the wind. I trample them like mud in the streets. You have freed me from the feuds among the people. You have appointed me the head of nations. A people I had not known serve me. Foreigners submit to me, cringing. As soon as they hear, they obey me. Foreigners lose heart and come trembling from their fortifications. Yahweh lives. Blessed be my rock. The God of my salvation is exalted. God, he grants me vengeance and subdues people under me. He frees me from my enemies. You exalt me above my adversaries. You rescue me from violent men. Therefore, I will give thanks to you among the nations, Yahweh. I will sing praises about your name. He gives great victories to his king. He shows loyalty to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. And that is the reading of Psalm number 18. Again, a praise for deliverance, a royal psalm, or some would classify it as as a psalm of declarative praise. You might have noticed, I guess depending on your translation, you might have noticed that there's a bit of an inclusio at the beginning of this psalm and at the end. It begins with love. David says, I love you, Yahweh, my strength. And then the psalm ends without the word love, at least in the Christian Standard Bible translation. He gives great victories to his king. He shows loyalty to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. The word loyalty there is a word that we've noticed from time to time, the Hebrew word hesed. It is a word that is often translated as faithful love or faithful loyalty or faithfulness. The idea here is the love that God has toward his covenant people. So the psalm begins with David expressing his love for Yahweh, and it basically goes throughout the rest of the psalm talking about why God loves Yahweh so much. But then once we get to the end, we can see the way that Yahweh has loved David, looking back into the psalm. So you have that inclusio there. You also have the idea that Yahweh is my rock. This is the first time that this idea is used in the Psalter up until this point. Later on, he's referred to as my rock where I seek refuge. There was a big fortress, a natural fortress in the land of Israel known as Masada. And this would have been maybe the idea that David was getting from his relationship with Yahweh as he meditated upon this. And that's really what I think. I should mention this previously. That's what I think Psalm 18 is. I think Psalm 18 is a meditation or a reflection from David's perspective at all the different ways that God had blessed him throughout his rule, especially whenever it came to those who were his enemies. That Yahweh, throughout the time that he was king, was his rock, was his fortress, was his refuge, was his stronghold and salvation. Everything that David accomplished as he looks back seems to be, from his perspective, it seems to be able to be directly attributed to Yahweh. He is the one who made all of this happen. I call to Yahweh, who is worthy of praise, and I was saved from my enemies. Did you catch that? Well, that in Psalm 46 is, or excuse me, verse 46 as well. That those are both verses from the song we sing, I will call upon the Lord. Again, I call to the Lord who is worthy of praise. I was saved from my enemies. And then the Lord lives. Blessed be my rock. And the God of my salvation is exalted. Again, the words from a song that we sing. And I really do love it whenever our modern day hymns, and I say modern day, the songs we sing today find their root in the Psalter itself. Beginning verse number 3 and going through verse number 19, we see Yahweh as David's rescuer. David is certainly found himself in numerous perilous predicaments. In verses 4 and 5, the ropes of death were wrapped around me, the torrents of destruction terrified me, the ropes of Sheol entangled me, the snares of death confronted me. In many perilous situations. And what did David do in those perilous situations? I called to Yahweh in my distress. I cried to my God for help from his temple. He heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Why? Because God cared for David. He cared for David. And we're going to see that he comes to David's rescue. His power is described in verses 7 through 14. This is something like a Mount Sinai type scene. We think about the great mountain and everything that took place whenever the people approached it in the Exodus. There's earthquake that is described almost like a volcano. There's a tornado type imagery here, as well as lightning and thunder and all the like. God displays his power in these descriptive ways from David's perspective here within the psalm. And yet that's what people see of God. They don't actually see God because he made darkness his hiding place, dark storm clouds, his canopy around him. We don't actually see God, but we are able to see his power as demonstrated through this imagery that is mentioned here within the psalm. Beginning of verse 16, notice that total credit is given to Yahweh for what David has experienced. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He pulled me out of deep water. He rescued me. Yahweh was my support. He brought me out to a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. So the strength and power is attributed to God. And David even mentions, whenever I've been confronted by my enemies, those who hate me, they were too strong for me. I'm weak. The end of verse 17. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but Yahweh was my support. I am weak, yes, but Yahweh is strong. So the question might be, why would strong Yahweh come to the defense of weak David? Well, his intervention, verses 20 through 29, God's intervention in David's life is a result of God's character, coupled together with David's character. Yahweh rewarded me according to my righteousness. He repaid me according to the cleanness of my hands. For I have kept the ways of Yahweh, have not turned away from Yahweh, have not turned to wickedness. I keep his ordinances, I keep his statutes, I'm blameless toward him. I've kept myself from iniquity. Again, David talks about his righteousness, the cleanness of his hands. So is David here saying that he has earned these blessings from Yahweh? I don't think that's the case whatsoever. Again, he just admitted that he is weak. And we can think of moments of weakness in David's life, even morally. But what I think is the emphasis here is to show Yahweh's faithfulness to the faithful, to show his loyalty to the loyal. Because David submitted himself to live according to the character desired by God, God then turned around and showed him faithfulness, showed him his loyal character. With the faithful, you prove faithful. Whenever we show faithfulness, God shows faithfulness. With your blamelessness, you show blamelessness. With our blamelessness, his blamelessness. Our purity, his purity. But with the crooked, what does Yahweh show? Well, he shows his shrewdness. He shows his justice. For who does God rescue? He doesn't rescue the enemy. No, he rescues the oppressed people. He humbles those with haughty eyes. But for David, Yahweh blessed him, and blessed him to the extent that David is then able to say, I can attack a barricade, and with my God, I can leap over a wall. So I'll pause here for a second and just again ask you to recognize the pronouns here. So much of this is about Yahweh, what he has done, what you have done. We certainly see that within this next section, 30 through 36. His way is perfect. The word of Yahweh is pure. He is a shield. He clothes me with strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer, sets me on secure place. He trains me. You have given me. Your right hand upholds me. Your humility exalts me. You make a spacious place beneath me, for my steps and my ankles do not give way. So again, so much emphasis on Yahweh, but then we might see something here that's a bit out of place. Then David starts talking about himself. He says, I pursue. I do not turn back. I crush. Well, what's up with that? Well, then we continue on verses 39 and 40, and he gets back to Yahweh. You have clothed me, you subdue, you make my enemies retreat before me. But then he gets back to himself again. I annihilate those who hate me. I pulverize them, I trample them. So what's up here? Can David not be consistent on who's doing the work here? Is David kind of wishy-washy, going back and forth from, I guess Yahweh does it, but I do it too? Is he caught between two minds? I'll suggest that the explanation here is that these I sections, these quote unquote I sections, are only there because of the you sections. David recognizes anything he has been able to do as Israel's king, as Yahweh's king, representing him here on the earth. It's only because of what Yahweh has done. If Yahweh had not strengthened David to do these things, he would have failed. He would not have accomplished anything at all. But with Yahweh's help, with the strength that Yahweh provides, with everything that he did, David was able to recognize what then he, weak David, was able to accomplish by the strength of Yahweh alone. You have freed me from the feuds among my people. You have anointed me the head of the nations. And he starts talking about the rule that he has been able to accomplish, again, not just over Israel, but even over some of the nations, because of what Yahweh has done. Again, he frees me from my enemies, verse 48. You exalt me above my adversaries. You rescue me from violent men. And think about all the different enemies and adversaries and violent men that David had been rescued from by God. Saul, probably foremost of those. So because of this, therefore, the conclusion, therefore, I will give thanks to you among the nations, Yahweh. I will sing praises about your name. He gives great victories to his king. He shows loyalty to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. So as David again looks back on his life, and I think that's the historical setting we should probably put this in. It says that this is the words of the song to Yahweh on the day Yahweh rescued him from the grasp of all of his enemies and from the power of Saul. That seems to be different occasions there. So this does seem, at least from my perspective and understanding, to be David looking back and recognizing everything that Yahweh had done for him, all the different enemies, all the different enemies that he had faced, and again, foremost being Saul. So as he looks back, he says, all I can do is give thanks. All I can do is express my gratitude for what Yahweh has done for me. Again, on the front end, I love you, Yahweh, because of this. And then on the back end, Yahweh's loyalty is highlighted, and his loyalty has looked like this, looking back from verse 15, back to verse number 1. So from verse 1 to verse 15, from verse 50 to verse number 1, we see why David loves Yahweh and what Yahweh's loyalty exactly looks like. But here within the psalm, specifically in verses 49 and 50, verse 49 is quoted in Romans chapter 15 and verses 8 and 9. In Romans 15, verse 8 and 9, I'll just turn over there and read that together with you. Romans 15, verses 8 and 9. Again, Paul quoting from this psalm. He says, let's see here. I'll start back in verse number 7. Therefore, accept one another, just as Christ also accepted you, to the glory of God. For I say that Christ became a servant to the circumcised on behalf of God's truth, to confirm the promises to the fathers, and so that Gentiles may glorify God for his mercy. As it is written, therefore I will praise you among the Gentiles, and I will sing praise to your name. David did have power over the nations, But you notice that in verse 50, it talks about Yahweh's loyalty was not just to David, but also to his descendants forever. Well, who is the great descendant of David? Well, certainly it's Jesus. And there has been no power demonstrated by a king any greater than King Jesus's power to redeem the nations back to his Father and back to their God. So that's the greatest fulfillment then of this whole psalm, is recognizing that it speaks to God's power to not just save David, but to save all men and all women of all the generations, and to do so through his king, not David, but through the Davidic king, Jesus, the Messiah. So as we think about the giving thanks among the nations, singing praises about his name, that thanksgiving and that praise is most especially necessary when we consider the gratitude, when we consider the salvation that has been brought by King Jesus to the entire world, and the fact that this has been God's plan from the very beginning. And he accomplished that. Why? Because he is great, he is mighty, and there's nothing outside of his ability. If you have any questions here about Psalm 18, I encourage you to leave that in the comment section below, and appreciate you take some time to read along with me on this Friday. Hope everybody's had a great week. Looking forward to being with everyone on Sunday, and looking forward to continuing our read through the Psalter on Monday. We'll be reading, I believe that's correct. I think we have that on the schedule. Actually, let me double check that schedule. Actually, I don't think I put actual dates on here. I just put for the week of, yeah, that's how I did this. Let's see here. Yeah, Psalm 19, 20, and 21 for next week. I think I'll post that on Monday. So I'll be looking for that video to go live Monday morning as we read together from Psalm 19, which is probably one that is a bit familiar to us. It is I think there are a few songs that come from this psalm. Let me think here. Maybe so. Yeah. Psalm 19. I think Craig actually has been leading us in this the song that comes from this psalm recently. So maybe we'll sing that again together here sometime soon, since we've read through this psalm here, or since we will read through this psalm here next week. So looking forward to reading that with you. Have a great weekend. Let's have a great Lord's Day together, worshiping and studying on Sunday. And let's look forward to reading together from Psalm 19 on Monday. Take care and God bless.